This is the Pitt State Basketball Coaches Show with women's head coach Amanda Davied and men's head coach Jeff Boschee. Here's your host, Lomshek.
Greetings, Pitt State basketball fans. Welcome to our weekly show with the Pitt State basketball coaches. I'm Lomshek, to be joined by women's coach Amanda Davied here to start things for this week. If you're with us on this Monday the 8th, cold, cloudy day outside, our final shows of the calendar year. Both Pitt State teams coming off wins at home last Thursday over Central Oklahoma, this past Saturday with Rogers State. We'll go back through that, but good to have both teams 2-0 in conference play. Obviously, no games this coming week. Final exams for the fall semester, and then we'll get back to kind of a scattered schedule for the rest of the calendar year, but we'll be able to get all those games on the air for you. Coach Davied, it's a bottom line business, thankfully, and there's no column for style points or moral victories. We say that all the time, or moral losses, whatever. So obviously you're still a team that's learning your way, so to speak, with the inexperience. So talk about being able to grind through a couple and indeed start 2-0.
Yeah, we are for sure still learning our offense, still learning each other. I'm still learning, who to call plays for and who's going to be on the receiving end of those. And so it's definitely good to be in the spot that we're in. I mean, we could easily have that flipped. And like I've said before, we're humble enough to know that. But we're very grateful for being on the winning side of things. And it's a much different locker room when you're winning than it is when you're losing. So, but I do credit the kids for that because they've had their backs against the wall a couple times.
Yeah.
Numerous times, and they've responded. And I keep leaning on that, when we start to get more familiar with each other, get more familiar with the offense, because everybody's going to, all the good teams, and now that they have film, are going to stop your first looks. So you've really got to get to the next ones, and that is a natural occurrence with any team, let alone a very new team.
To me, maybe mental toughness is the most valuable life lesson that can be taken from athletics, and I'm all about the life lessons. Talk about the mental toughness need when your shots aren't falling.
Yeah, well, we talked a lot about mental toughness and about energy. Like, you cannot get down on yourself. You can't, and my role kind of is to do that. My role is to be completely honest and sometimes poking the bear and just trying to get a reaction. And so we really talked a lot about the energy we share between each other. There's a study on, I think, the Boston Celtics about just positive touches or just touches in general, like high fives, interactions and all that. And that's when they won the national championship that they had the most touches, and it's just getting on the bus and just all the different things. And so we talk a lot about that. And that was the halftime message versus Rogers. And there was a different message in the first time out. But you have to continue to stay positive. And I do think that's a life lesson. I kind of told him, like, hey, someday you're going to have kids. What are you going to do if they're in the dumps? You're just going to watch them? Like, are you going to go help them? Are you going to, because if not, they're going to spiral. Like, you've got to have some positive interaction. You got to try to pick each other up, and we're a family. So the more that we can try to find anything positive, no matter what it is, and not focus on missing shots, the better off we'll be. And we did get that shift changed, and I feel like Harper had a lot to do with that. The group that was in when we kind of made our run, they were doing it. And so hopefully we'll continue to buy into some of those intangibles, those life lessons. And the mental toughness is a big part of that because you also have to be mentally tough enough to do it and not get consumed with yourself. We use the Energy Bus book a lot in our program. This is kind of the shift in changing of the guards that haven't read that book. It's a phenomenal book for energy and an organization working with each other and picking each other up, getting on the bus. And if you're not going to have a positive attitude, then you got to get off the bus. Like, you can't sit on the bench and be bringing people down. So a lot to do with that.
You mentioned that kind of stuff, and people see little things, and sometimes it may not register, but I know you're big on the culture of the program because when you bring in recruits, I go to these freshmen from Northwest Arkansas, when they came and watched those games in the regional last season, they could tell there's a support network there, there's a culture. But just talk about little things like when a player gets subbed out, whether or not they want to. Everybody wants to play as much as you can, but how important is it to go down the bench, all the way down to the student trainers, and give everybody five and make sure you're acknowledging that it's okay, that somebody, you have to trust your teammates, right?
Right, and that is a big piece of it, and there's no secret to it that coaches watch benches. Some coaches have called it Benergy. Like, there's all kinds of coin phrases, and you want to hold your kids accountable to that. So it's definitely something that we talk about. And, it's I just retweeted something that was, the starters set the tone, but the bench, they're the heart and soul of the team. You can really tell what the team really is made of with that. And even when you're that starter, you get your first foul, how do you go set? Do you cheer on now that you've flipped roles?
Right.
Are you big enough to be that person that's supporting cast, and how important it is for you to cheer them on? So a lot of those things. And yeah, I did start thinking, I was kind of relating it to everything but culture at halftime about the things we needed to do to get the shift of it's not about just missing shots. We got to change our focus on something else. It's not going to help if you keep focusing on it. It's just going to make it heavier. So try to find some good things. But it is culture. That is a culture. It's a culture of an organization, wherever you work, wherever all of us work, Pittsburgh State. Like, our culture in our athletic department is really good right now.
Yeah.
And I've talked to them about that. Like, this is a do more culture right now. Like, it's not okay to not be winning. It's not okay. I mean, it is. Like, if in your life, like, you could get by with that, but that's not what we're built on, and it's not what we're all here for. And so yeah, we do talk a lot about that bench and the culture and all of those things.
Well, and again, point out that you're winning close games. We can sit here and focus on, well, what needs to be better, and we'll talk about some of this stuff, but it's not like it's costing you games right now. Ultimately, your job is to try and get this team to play as consistently as possible. You talk about bench. I'll jump forward to the Rogers State game. Not specific to that game, but you had tremendous contributions from Hannah Miller and Cambry Phillips. In your mind as a coach, what makes a good bench player?
No, I have noticed our bench points, I think the last couple games. We're 18 or 25, or, Hannah Miller had 20 to help us in one of the first games of the year at Northern. So it is really good for those kids. We tell them, like, bring something. Like, just don't go just sub in. Like, you've been watching, what can you do to give us some relief or to continue to carry? So yeah, Cambry and Hannah have done a great job. I was just telling myself, man, I don't know if I want to talk about those things, because it seems like as a coach, every time you start to talk about the good things, it sometimes dissipates. But I feel like you have to give those kids a lot of credit for going in and I told them last year, I believe, like, starters, you almost have it easier because the bench has to go in and do something in those moments. Like, sometimes the starters, they have longer leash and those kind of things. So it is almost a heavier carry to be that bench player and going in and making an impact.
I think it was Kevin Muff when he was a men's coach here. He'd stress to his guys, if you're not a starter, how does a game change when you come in? And that kind of thing. And so you hear all these little things, coaches, that stuff's been shared over the years through all that stuff. So Central Oak comes in for your conference opener, and the eyes are the first to go here. So I'm going to break out my cheaters. But Central Oak, newness like you, in the form of a new head coach. And they only have one, maybe a couple of returning players. So maybe dealing with even more newness. There are some teams around the league with that, because I think we have 3 new coaches on the women's side this year. But going into the Central Oak game, what was your first impression of them, where they were sitting at 1-4, I think it was?
Well, we wanted to continue to give them trouble in their shooting. Their percentages weren't outstanding, and so you want to at least be able to defend them like everyone else has, and make people make tough shots. And then I think rebounding's been our stronghold, so we want to continue to do that. And so just with that in hand, it's like make them take one shot or none, and let's go to the other end and run. And so yeah, we wanted to push the tempo and challenge them with the new group. But she's done a really nice job. They mirror our offenses and what we run, and so it was a very familiar scout. So we just thought, like, we should be able to guard their stuff efficiently, and I'm sure they felt the same way. They did a little differently than we did. They were stopping that dump pass to the post. We traditionally are aware of that, but just when you haven't had the reps to look at the next layer, which would be the skip pass, and it's hard. You're going straight downhill as hard as you can. We're telling you go do that so we can get to the foul line, make people guard you, and then you got to either stop on a dime or read it all real fast and make that skip pass. And so yeah, we thought that we could hopefully guard them efficiently, and I thought we did a pretty good job of that.
There were 19 turnovers in this game, and that's been a thing for you. It was much better against Rogers State, and we'll get to that. But you talk about read it quickly. Talk about the fraction of a second or whatever it is in your offense that you're doing that, because against Central Oak, there were plenty of balls that seemed like on those dumps poked away from the rear. What are you telling your guards as they're driving? What are they trying to see in terms of read the help defender, not the primary defender?
Well, and that's where we're at. That's what we're getting to right now. And a lot of it's because we have 7 new ones that are just trying to learn the first look of the offense and try to get their own. And I think we'll probably get to it, but that lends to our assist. And so everybody's trying to go score, and then you get that first look, and now teams are starting to take away the first look, the next read, and so it's just the natural progression of our offense and where we're at. It's no different than on a ball screen. You're going to try to go get the layup first, and then if your man helps, you're going to get the dump, and then if they tag on the back of it, you're going to throw the skip back. And so it is a lot to read in the speed of the game, and and having your shot sped up and the pressure of the defense. We have a lot of high school seniors that, really high school seniors that are playing against junior seniors.
Yeah.
And so the post player is also supposed to seal out that rotation down and try to gather and score. And it's just a lot of pressure. One little finger on the ball changes, how it lands in your hands. And but we're okay with where we've been right now. We just have to continue to get better. And the next day at practice and the Rogers State game, one of the first plays we threw a skip pass. So it tells me that the kids are paying attention and they aim to please and they know the IQ of it. It's just how fast can they get there in the games, the speed of the game when everything's, it's a different team and those things.
You talk about being okay with where you are, that you can see them seeing some things, and of course doing it at game speed is different. How do you feel with where you are for the year as far as your installation and options you have?
I want to have more in, but until I get a feel for who is making the plays, and we're still learning about other team or our own offensive sets and the little the nuances that go in with those, and now you're learning other teams on top of that. So you're doing 30 minutes of film each day in prep for the 2 games a week, and so when do you fit in, adding things to your own toolbox. And so, but we are going to continue to gradually, get there. And I think we've had some kids that have shown some consistency, and I'm starting to figure out a few areas that we can use them in. And, we're just continuing to build. So not extremely excited. I want to be able to help them more, but until we know who can finish the plays, I don't know. And I think that's where sometimes I try to get them into ball screens or whatever to help them, but really we were better in dribble drive, which is what happened with Rogers State. I tried to help them too much, and it's we're being fine, we're getting to the line. I'm taking away their opportunities to get fouls called and those kind of things. So we just went back to it, and the girls did a good job.
Pitt State women grinding with their inexperience, but grinding to 2 wins in conference play. We need to take our first break with Coach David. When we come back, we'll talk a little more about the win over Central Oak and eventually the win over Rogers State, and look forward to a week off before the Gorilla women will hit the road in the coming days. We'll do all of that with Coach David right after this.
The Silverback Fund just helps us go above and beyond to be able to be the best in the MIAA.
You see it as a financial investment, but it's really an investment in people, which is what Pitt State's all about.
We recruit at such a high level. We are competing against a lot of Division I's now. What's going to set us apart and have us in the conversation is the financial part of it.
We couldn't have this success without individual donors, without the community support.
If you're on the fence about giving, come out to games, look at the athletes, and see what kind of experiences they're getting.
Welcome back to our Pitt State Basketball Coaches Shows. Again, our final shows of the calendar year. We'll take about a 3-week break and be back after the first of the year. Pitt State teams winding down this portion of the schedule, obviously, and so a couple of conference games in the books, and only 17 more to go in the grind that is the MIAA. That's it, Coach. So you just win every game, and we'll be celebrating Coach of the Year again if you never lose again. So no pressure with that. But Coach, Central Oak game and Rogers State both rebounded the heck out of the ball for tough shooting games. And coaches talk about if you're not going to make shots from the field, or if they're not falling, you can always control rebounding effort, and you try and get to the free throw line and that type of thing. Casey McCumber's already had 3 games with at least 15 rebounds for you. Corinna Gerber's my daughter-in-law now, and I texted her dad. I said, well, Casey might challenge Corinna's rebound record. I don't know about the field goal percentage record, but Casey, man, the Windex specialist, right? How about the effort from your freshman post?
It's outstanding, and it is exactly why we recruited her. It's what we saw was just that dog mentality and just the extra effort and just all the things. And so, I've told this story a bunch, but I'm sure we'll tell it as we get through. Hopefully, she's here all 4 years, and it's just when I was watching her in high school, it was probably a couple of years ago. We worked 3 years on those kids.
Yeah.
We wanted to get more into Northwest Arkansas. It's a really close area, great basketball. And but she's playing, and I'm talking to Brad Johnson, who, like I said, was Farmington coach. He's now at Arkansas. And all of a sudden, Casey comes barreling into a pile of bags at the end of the bench, and I'm like, I'll offer that kid right now.
Yeah.
And of course, he was at Farmington, and so yeah, that was the start of just watching her play with so much grit and tenacity. And you have to have a motor on a team. Harper is obviously a motor, and seeing that Harper's going to be leaving, it's not all the time that motor is your post player. Mm-hmm. But Casey definitely, gives everybody a model of like how hard you're supposed to play. I think Harper does that. Now we need them to zero in on some philosophy things and like some next play things and just how to control the offense and all those things. But their effort is never questioned. And Casey, I'll compare her to Maddie Northcutt, just to give a name of a blast from the past of those players you have to have that make impacts that aren't always scoring. And Harper's one of those as well. We're really proud of her. We're excited for how she's doing. I was pretty confident that would be her role, and we'd love. She's going to develop footwork. She's going to get all the things, and we did when we were recruiting her too. The other player was, we're losing Corinna, and so we thought that, you scour the within 5 hours, and we thought Casey was as close as we could get. And to be able to get to at least 1 point of what we're missing with Corinna, which is rebounding, and in that same position. You got to kind of just go with this is the one, and not try to find everything. You can develop some of these other things.
Casey, I remember talking to her over the summer at your camps because they went from being camp alumni to being workers, right? And I'd talk to you and the current Farmington coach. I'm like, tell me one of those players who'd be a good interview. And you just kind of want to get a feel for who we're getting as a player, and Casey comes in. But how about her personality?
Well, actually, now that you mention that, Corinna was always the biggest sweetheart, the nicest girl, especially around, adults and all that, and just so respectful and sweet. And Casey is the exact same way. I mean, she is yes, ma'am, to the point that it's almost, like, would you stop saying that, But she is just so respectful and so sweet, and then she is the ultimate competitor, and so is Corinna. And so it is fun to see the similarities within that group for sure.
Coach, go to Rogers State game, and let me backtrack real quick, because one thing about Central Oak, when you're in games like that, Coach Lord used to talk about players have to make plays, right? And you get a stop. Harper Schreiner, a couple of late free throws, seal that win. At least it gave you a 3-point lead, and the worst, you're going to go to overtime. And I know you guys love overtime games, this team. But Harper at the line, for all of Harper's experience, I think she's about an 81% career foul shooter. So talk about having a player like that in that situation.
Yeah, well, she's made 2 steals, which is where her undisciplined, and I tell her this, so it's not bagging on her. It's just that sometimes she's not the most disciplined defensive player. And then, she will make a play. And so she has made 2 plays. Northwestern Oak, she got a steal. And then UCO got a steal. And then actually, I feel like Rogers, maybe she had one that was a big moment play. So she does give us that energy when we need it. And putting her at the free throw line is a good place for her to have lots of confidence. And I just think that she's a winner. She's a great leader, and she competes her tail off. And so she's going to find her way to make plays that get winning moments.
And playing heavy minutes kind of need that right now out of her. And for the record, Harper, 159 career steals. She is 8th all time, only 2 behind Cammie Scribner for 6th. And so always an effort for Harper. So you go to the Rogers State game and end up pulling away. We'll kind of go through the game a little bit, but 0 for 8 start from the field. So you're coming off a game in which you didn't shoot it great, you didn't make a 3. As a coach, it wasn't even 48 hours later. Any part of you that worries there, like, boy, we're in our own head about shots not falling?
Yeah, you rethink everything you've said to this point. You start to, the mind stuff. And we've tried about everything. So I went from positive to negative to, just all of it. And we've told Clara not to be in the gym. We're doing everything, see what sticks. And so it is one of those things, the more you talk about it, the more it's going to draw attention to it. And it's like I shift it to, we start to talk about some positive things like our rebounding, our defense. We are able to play some defense. We we need to get better at assist, but just those are the 2 main things that we're positive about. And so defense and rebounding can win championships too. And that's what I think I told him at halftime is, it's 29-26, and we've had this conversation a lot, is you actually could, and I've told you this after there. I don't know if I've used any defensive talks about any of our teams. So it's kind of changing some things I talk about as a coach too. But you could literally win this game on defense if you just do our scout better, 4 points better. You could do what you've done on offense, which is not very good, and win this game surely with defense. And so, again, trying to shift that paradigm of just it's not always about offense. And that has been a stronghold of our program. And so it would be nice to be able to say we can be a defensive team, but it's a lot more fun and easier to make shots.
Well, it worked because they scored 26 in the first half and 25 in the second half. So good job with that, or 23, whatever it was, Roger State. So, or no, 23 points. So it worked in that regard. Marin Adams leads you in scoring in this game, and Marin for the year has taken less than 20 3-point attempts. People think about being a perimeter player, and you actually go a second straight game without a three, but Marin, not a high-volume shooter from the perimeter. How would you describe her skill set offensively?
Well, to be fair, I jinxed Marin because I, at practice one day, said, why would we not get Marin the ball? She's 52% from the floor. She's 40% from the three, 85 from the free throw line, and so that's all my fault, and I've told her that. But she's a strong-minded player, and she's a great offensive player, and so she is going to be a person that will be, the most offensive minded, and I've tried to give her that confidence. We need somebody. Her reads are the right reads, and so to me that displays that I know what she's. If I see the defense going under or whatever, I can make calls, and she's going to take the right shots. And that's something we're kind of struggling with. Is like we've gotten better, but taking contested shots, taking high degree of difficulty shots. But our last two games, I do feel like it's been better. But yeah, Marin as a player, she's going to be, she is going to be confident. She was confident before. She's getting into a couple games here where she hasn't scored, but it's going to come back around for us, I think, at the right time, and Marin's going to be a big part of that. I'm sure of it.
One thing about it as a 6-footer, and you had a bigger guard in Grace Powell the last 4 years. Talk about Marin recognition, because I've seen sometimes she might be able to get into the paint with somebody 5'6" guarding her. Do you feel like she's recognizing that and that she can just elevate and score over them?
Yeah, I do. I think she's getting to her spots, kind of using this little Barkley dribble. You drive in, you kind of take a short little dribble, get you back to the rim. And so I think she's trying to figure out how to get high percentage shots. And she'll turn the corner and get some layups that are helpful. She came up with an offensive board the other day at the end of the half, I believe, that gave us a little boost. And so I just think she's going to continue to make plays. She's a very smart player. She doesn't get too high, too low. She's pretty monotone with her emotions, but that's not a bad thing either. And so, I've told her that she needs to be that for us as far as be the player, because I think it will relieve some pressure from some upperclassmen, to be honest. And they are used to having those players around. Harper is used to having, I would say Batman, but she's honestly used to having like Superman. Like she's used to having some players around her, and so she needs that. She needs somebody that will take the shots, and so I think Marin is probably the most consistent with taking those.
We talked earlier about Cambry Phillips and Hannah Miller off the bench. Between the two of them, they scored 19 points in the win over Rogers State. Cambry, very athletic, has some bounce to her. Talk about her game as far as a shooter versus a slasher driver.
She's still trying to figure it out, honestly. In high school, with her travel team, I saw her play at all three levels. She was a little inconsistent. Again, we've talked about these things. But she came in her first few weeks here and was really consistent in threes and drives and the free throw line. And then she kind of, JB stepped her defense up, and then so she kind of got challenged. But now she's kind of went from driver, and now she's shooter. And so again, I think it will all come together at the right time where she's consistent with both, and she believes that too. I'll ask players a lot what they think, where they think they're at first, and she's expressed that exact same sentiment. So I do think that she's evaluating her game very well, and she's working on all the things. They come in and get extra workouts in, and so she'll continue to develop really nice.
One thing about the Rogers State game, you pulled away, just dominated the last 14 minutes of the game, had a 24-4 run over 9.5 minutes. They had done a really good job first half not turning the ball over, and then you guys really cashed that in late third quarter when they started struggling. They went 5 straight and 6 of 7 possessions with a turnover. Conversely, You only had 10 in this game, right? And so, knock on wood, I know you're a little superstitious about free throws or turnovers and that a little bit. But how big of a teaching point can that be for this team, this young team, about taking care of the ball in crunch time?
Yeah, believe it or not, we've talked about it. It has been it's been a conversation we've had. It's been some film sessions we've had to just painfully sit and watch your decisions. Like, what are you doing? And when do we ever do that in practice? And so trying to get them to understand that you got to stick to the blueprint and stop trying to reinvent the wheel and making passes that people aren't ready for, and high risk plays when we're ahead. Like, what? Why would we do that? And so I would like to think, I actually saw, and I know I saw a few players that they started to make a pass of some sort and they held it back, and I was like, oh, praise. And so, yeah, you hope that your conversations are not falling on deaf ears. And we just told them it's going to be up to you. I mean, we have presented you the information. Like, we have, as coaches, presented this to you. We have talked you through it. We have given you the evidence. We've shown you the statistics of where we're playing in close games. If we just change 4 or 5 of those possessions, it might be 8 points, and then it was. And so at this point, they should be strong believers in it. And but we just put it on them that you can change it or not. Like, we're tired of talking about it. It's really going to be your decisions. And you know better than to keep doing this. But at the end of the day, we can't control what you do between the lines when the lights are bright.
Yeah. So, well, it worked out in that game. The Gorillas get 2 conference wins, allowed less than 60 points in both games. No games during the week. How much of a different schedule with final exams, and are they going to be setting up the arena for graduation, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we'll have normal practices today. We could arrange them around their schedules, but it just didn't quite work. And so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Wednesday we're going off. We're going to go a couple days, and then we're going to take Wednesday off, which the kids will still get in, I'm sure. And then Thursday, Friday, we will go hardcore Hayes information. And we're already working on that, but it will be much like a routine 2 days before. And of course, we'll travel to Hayes Friday and get in their gym because we haven't been there. So we're going to get a lot of shots up in their gym. I assume they'll make us shoot threes. They're a lot different this year too, so they might not have quite the experience, but they're still strong in the post, very aggressive in the post. That's their first look every trip down the floor. The Weeder girl is very, very good, I think it's Leve, looks like Lo, the point guard. She's pass first, but she's a very good point guard, we respect them quite a bit, and they're doing a really nice job.
It's a single non-conference game for the women Saturday at Hayes. That's a 2 o'clock tip. We'll have that one starting at 1:35, and then the girls will, the following week, go to Lawton, Oklahoma for a holiday classic, and we'll be on the road with them for that as well. So the calendar year winding down. Gorilla women 2-0 in MIAA play, and it is a bottom-line business with that. So we'll take our next break. When we come back, men's coach Jeff Boschee will join us on the other side of the Pitt State basketball shows right after this. Welcome back to the Pitt State basketball shows. Eddie Lomshek, now joined by men's coach Jeff Boschee. Gorilla men, like the women, at home, of course, for the conference opening action late last week. Wins at home over Central Oak and Rogers State for the Pitt State men. 2 different games in some regards. Central Oak, they never trailed. Rogers State certainly had some back and forth to it before Pitt State dominated down the stretch. But, Coach, just like the girls, regardless of how it comes, there's the bottom line element to it. So talk about your guys taking care of home court and winning those first 2 in league.
Yeah, I thought we just had good energy. I thought we looked fresh. We kind of tailed back a little bit on what we've been doing in practice, going shorter. It did feel like the Bethany game. I felt like our guys were tired. So with as many injuries as we have, just talking with the staff and stuff, and Coach Evans, strength coaches, trying to tail back a little bit because we're only practicing 10, 11 guys, and those guys getting as many reps as they were in practice. I felt like they were a little bit sluggish, but I felt our guys were energized in the Central Oklahoma game. Felt like our legs were good. Defensively, we were doing some things that we had gotten back to that we were doing previously, and the same with the Rogers State, and just the toughness that we showed all weekend was really good, and against 2 really good teams, 2 teams that were picked over us in the conference, and Obviously, Central Oak not having Seabach definitely helped, but I thought we stayed focused, and both games we were really good, especially on the defensive end of the floor. The percentages may not show it, but the way we turned them over really helped us.
Yeah, you talk about them missing a pretty key player, but nobody has to tell you about that. Have there been some days this season, literally, where you've had fewer guys available than not, or close?
Well, we got 18 on the
50,
roster, so that's quite 50. A bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
got to be some 50-50 days in there.
We've started calling it the infirmary, just with as many guys that we've got sitting out on the sideline or getting extra work after weights, and sometimes in the film room they'll go upstairs and get extra work in with Coach Ev, and we only got 10, 11 guys in the locker room, so it seems a little bit bare and empty. But our strength coach and training staff does a heck of a job of getting those guys back. It's just the consistent nagging things that keep coming and going, and it is what it is. But yeah, we trying to figure that all out, and hopefully those guys can get back soon.
With that said, there comes a point you go with who you have, and ultimately, I've definitely seen it through these two games that guys take on different roles, whether it's Hayden Shanks playing bigger or some of your guards guarding some bigger players and things like that. So talk about the buy-in that you feel you have from the guys that are available and just doing whatever's needed of them.
Yeah, that's one thing with Hayden. I think Hayden just does whatever needs to be done, and that's why he's playing. You look at, I think we've talked about this before, but you look at his stats, it's nothing that glares out. I think he's made 3 threes on the year, and maybe he scored, I think he's averaged maybe 4 or 5 a game, something like that. But just what he does on the defensive side of the floor, the effort plays that he makes, the smart IQ plays, just being, the other night against Roger State, we were late in rotations, and he slides over and takes the dump off guy and gets a steal off of that. He just knows how to play, and I feel like in the years past he was doing those things in practice, and then not carrying over to the game, kind of playing a little bit unconfident in the game situations. But now it's he's turned the totally different page. But other guys like Elijah Curry, I thought the last 2 games has been really good. His effort against Central Oklahoma, he didn't score the basketball and didn't rebound it great, but just his effort defensively and guarding Willenberg and those other bigs that they had was really good. And then obviously just seeing him progress and play with confidence against the Roger State game and having 15 and doing some things that we thought we were going to get out of him when we were recruiting him, and he started to do those things, driving the basketball, finishing around the rim, and making some really good passes. And that's the I think the blessing that you kind of look at it. You could look at it negatively and gripe and moan about it, or you can look at it in a positive way and say, hey, these other guys are going to get more time, more experience, and then when we get some of those guys back, I think it makes us a little bit deeper too.
Yeah, Elijah, definitely more assertive. That was pretty noticeable. You talked about some things with Central Oak, the energy there. Hold their teams to 63, because going into the game, one concern you mentioned, it's impossible to prepare for all their sets. You can't literally scout them all and have an answer for everything. And his team's usually very efficient. Coach Hoffman there on offense, 63 points. And I thought from the word go, you could hear your team talk on defense. And then with the number of guys guarding bigger players, the help has to be there. What'd you see half-court defense against Central Oak as you hold them to 63?
Well, I thought we did a good job of pressuring on the perimeter. We made some adjustments there in the first half with Willenberg getting open and some of the pick and pop situations and being out on the perimeter and not pressuring him enough. And we made the adjustments to switch. And, the second half they went to, instead of him popping, just touching and going and trying to get the rim. And I thought our switches and communication was really good. But that was something we emphasized all week leading up to it, is the communication's got to be elite. You're not going to know all the sets. If there's any emergencies, we've got to be able to switch it and then understand if, we need help down in the post as far as a little being on a bigger guy, that we got to go trap that and get that thing out of there. And, the Nowalco kid, he's definitely improved from where he was at Central Missouri last year. And I think they're putting him in situations where he can really use his skill set. And, he got his points, but I feel like, they were tough. They were contested points. And the biggest thing when you're a little bit smaller and undersized, you just got to play with a lot more heart. And we got guys, especially like Hayden, that play with a ton of heart and play a lot bigger than what he is.
Yeah, it's almost comical watching Coben guard a 6'6" forward that can put it on the ball, right? David doing all he can, but that's where the help comes in. Not that Central Oak had a lot of turnovers, they only had 6, but the help was good to stop some of that dribble drive. Talked with Coach David about mental toughness and athletics. You're in a game like that, you have to communicate. It has to be as close to 40 minutes as possible. You guys never trailed in this game. They had an 11-2 run to pull within a bucket late in the first half. So this is one of the key stretches of this game to me, is that you open it back up. Not only half-court defense, but you have to answer, right? And so offensively, it was a pretty efficient night for you guys with percentages and only 9 turnovers. Talk about the need to answer, and your guys kind of stepping up when they had to a couple of times in this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's the adversity that you go through the entire game, and understanding. And we did that in both games, with the Rogers State game and this game, and just the adversity you're gonna face, and not, we tell our guys, and we've been talking a lot about this, but I heard Nick Saban say this one time, but mental toughness is defined as what does it take to break you, mentally, where you lose focus on the other aspects of the game. Everybody wants to score the basketball, and that's what the fans see, and that's what everybody loves. But if you're not scoring the basketball, or you're defensively you're making mistakes and you're not getting stops, does that break your focus on the other jobs that you have to do? I thought our guys just they stayed the course. They didn't panic, and obviously guys stepped up like Landon. When the UCO went on a run, guys like Landon stepped up, made some huge shots to give us a little bit of a breathing room, and give us a little bit more energy on the defensive end of the floor.
The impact stat of this game was 13-7 in 3-point baskets. Gorillas shot the heck out of it, 13 for 22. Mm-hmm. As a team, we can look at stats and percentages tell some of the story, but it comes into shot selection, but also passing has to be in the right spot. So talk about what you're seeing from your team, maybe the last couple games especially, with sharing the ball on the perimeter and knocking down some threes.
Yeah, I thought in the Rogers State game it was better. We made more threes in the Central Oak game, but I did feel like going back and watching the film after the game, and then the next game as well, like our spacing wasn't great. There's so many times like Connor and Mace would have the ball at the top of the key, and we'd be running our middle pick and roll actions, and our guys that are supposed to be in the corners to keep the spacing, we're up a little bit too high, and sometimes there's nowhere for the roll to go, or there's nowhere for the basketball to go. So we do got to continue to get better at that. We're just we talk a lot about letting the ball breathe, like give it room, give it space, and we made some tough shots, and that's the nice thing about having some pretty good players and some guys that can shoot it, because they can bail you out in certain situations. And but yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more spacing on the offensive end of the floor, and the other thing too is just creating shots and off of turnovers and missed shots, and getting out in transition and playing a little bit, alleviate some of that pressure.
Well, it was a huge part of the win over Rogers State, and we'll get to that eventually as well. In this game over Central Oak, Connor Rogers, 24 points, leads you in scoring, but also 9 assists. We've talked about him scoring. You saw some games when he was in junior college, he could score it. Mm-hmm. Talk about where he is and whether or not you consider him a true point guard as far as a distributor.
Yeah, I don't think I'd consider him a true point guard. I think he'd be more of a combo point guard or a scoring point guard. But, he does have the ability to pass. There's still times, you saw it in the Rogers State game where we're constantly harping with him and Mason to get rid of the basketball when you get 2 on the ball. And, so, being a shorter guy, sometimes that's a little bit harder to see that. We call it the C pass, where, you can see straight ahead, or the shake pass where you're seeing behind, but also seeing the short roll. But just knowing, understanding the defensive coverage that they're in, whether they're aggressive or whether they're softer coverage, and is within our ball screens, and it just understanding you got 2 on the ball, get rid of it, and that's one thing we talked about when we recruited him, with even with his dad and mom, his mom and brother, just like when he was at junior college, he didn't have a ton of shooting around him. I think he averaged 4 assists a game, and there's times where watching his film and evaluating him that. You seeing him make the right read, you see him make the right pass, but then you're passing it to a 25% 3-point shooter type thing, and so he's got the ability to do both, and that's a luxury of it. But I think he's more of a scoring-minded point guard than anything else.
But I look on the year, he's about a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. Do you guys consider that pretty good?
Yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah.
Obviously we'd like that to be a team. A team goal is always
Sure.
to be 2-1, but that's definitely every player, especially the guards, the guys that handle it the most. You want them to be 2 or 1 or better.
Well, and then of course Landon Short, and we'll get to him because he had just the monster week really with what he did. Mason English, 15 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds. He had a slow start against Rogers offensively, but again, you look where he is on the season as far as a freshman. Passing the ball. Talk about what you see from Mason as far as how he sees the floor and has a feel for your offense and where to look.
Yeah, I've talked to Mason about this a few times, and he's got the unique ability to kind of see, like, the game is so, I feel like the game is slowed down for him. He's got the unique ability to kind of see one pass or one play ahead, which is great for a point guard. I think sometimes it gets him in trouble because he sees something maybe somebody else doesn't, where he will, try to make the home run play instead of making the simple play. And I think that comes over time, just an experience and cutting down on those casual turnovers and trying to make the home run play every time. But, he's, I've said this before, but he's very similar to Jordan in the aspect that he sees, he does a good job of reading the coverages and seeing where the help is coming from and making that pass out. And that's something we work on a ton with our guards, is really, like pocket passes off of pick and rolls and getting rid of it. And, that's something as a freshman to come in and have that ability, that makes it comforting as a coaching staff.
One thing, too, about Central Oak, that not only shorthanded with injuries, Donald Coates was in foul trouble and played very little, and that got a lot better. You brought him off the bench against Rogers State. But when you are where you are, rotation-wise, depth-wise, talk about your guys. What do you stress to them as far as understanding the situation and not taking chances and just giving away fouls?
Well, and another thing too, that is adjusting to the way the game's being called. One person we've talked about, excuse me, is Landon, and fouling way too much and using your hands and being in situations defensively off the basketball where you're ready and you're alert, where you can get to spots quicker, where you're not late and then you're picking up cheap fouls. I thought Don a couple times trying to help and rescue and helping somebody out and got there a little bit late, or biting on a shot fake and then a guy goes up into him and that sort of thing. But the one thing we tell our guys all the time is when they do get in foul trouble, you got to stay focused on the bench. You got to keep watching and understanding what's going on, because if you just kind of daydream over on the sideline and when you get back in not ready to go, you got to be able to stay locked in when you get into that foul trouble.
Well, the Gorillas did have enough contributions locked in, indeed. It was a pretty consistent win over Central Oak, 77-63. We need to take our final break. When we come back, we'll talk about the win over Rogers State, talk about finals week for the Gorilla men, who go about a week and a half without playing. We'll do all of that with Coach Jeff Boschee right after this.
This isn't just where you go to class. It's where you chase what's possible, where grit isn't taught, it's lived. Every drop of sweat writes the next chapter in Gorilla history.
Ross out of the backfield, Bratton in trouble, Jordan Rogers!
This is pride. This is your future. This is Pitt State.
Welcome back to our final segment of the Pitt State Basketball Coaches Shows. Again, if you're with us on this Monday the 8th, Pitt State team's coming off a pair of wins, both of them, 2 open conference play at home late last week. Final exams for the fall semester this week at Pitt State. No games during the week. And this will be our final shows until after the first of the year. Reminder, Wednesdays at noon, Pitt State will release a video installment of these shows through their athletics department YouTube channel. Coach, Rogers State getting these Thursday, Saturday games, right? And so I'm an old guy and I get worn out easy. These things about kill me, especially we're on the road Thursday, Saturday. Talk about that dynamic. You basically have Friday to dive into the next opponent. I know coaches, you have somebody looking at stuff to break it down, but talk about dealing with that turnaround, not even 48 hours before you play again.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously having a deep coaching staff like we talked about last week, it definitely helps with that. And, obviously we prep and I prep, and majority of my stuff that, I'll focus on the opponent on Thursday, but I will catch a game or two, the day we play that Thursday game and try to watch that game for Saturday. The Friday, it's a, kind of a unique situation because you don't want to, in my opinion, I guess, just overdo it on the practice floor. You know, in the years past, we've kind of done more or less just individual work shooting, and then we just kind of just what we call dummy live it, where it's just we go through it game speed, but it's not, you know, full, you know, trying to score and stuff like that. But so we changed it, you know, we did it a little bit different on Friday, where we actually did get out and guard for about 25 minutes and guard their stuff and their actions. And the biggest thing I think that Saturday game is just understanding more or less, really understanding the personnel, and then just the tendencies, because you don't have you don't have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to really go through the sets. So you just got one day to get 4 or 5 sets in, and you know, it's a lot of information for our guys to put in their minds, but. You know, the biggest thing is just you know, making sure you don't overdo it to where they lose that energy and they lose their legs for that Saturday game.
Well, and you know, everybody does it. I mean, Rogers State and Central Oak, they're playing by the same deal, Thursday, Saturday. But what, your brother at Bemidji, they do Friday, Saturday, right?
Well, they did change it so that
okay.
They did for your division, you play Thursday, Saturday. But if you're in the if you're playing the South Division, they play Friday, Saturday. Which, I mean, you put all the factors in up north. I mean, the weather and roads, and I mean, it's I don't know how they do it.
No, I'm not either, and I'm not applying for any of those jobs in the frozen north with a Friday, Saturday, getting the toboggan and head over over hill, over dale from Bemidji to Duluth to wherever else, so they can have it. Rogers State comes in, and we talked in pregame. Justin Barkley's teams, man, they play hard, and you know you're in for a battle with them. And in fact, you guys burned a timeout a minute and a half into the game with people diving on the floor to save a possession, right? So you played well first half. You played with the lead before there was some back and forth. So going into this game, just talk about the things you emphasized with your guys with the Hillcats.
Well, the one thing we always know with them defensively, how they're going to play. They're going to be uber aggressive. They're going to be aggressive in ball screens this year. They've looking to trap a little bit more. So that's something we did work on Friday, just pick and roll coverages and making sure that we understand the focus to make sure we open up the right way in our pick and rolls. We have a great. We set the angle of the pick and roll the way we want it, and then also just like we talked previously, the C pass and the shake pass, and be able to get away from that. And anytime you get trapped, make sure you're not standing in the corner, you know, watching the guy get trapped come to the basketball. And that's what happened the first play. Connor gets trapped at the half court line, and you know, Elijah called the timeout. Elijah's been getting pretty antsy with calling timeouts here the last couple of games. I like to save my timeouts. I'm kind of a hoarder a little bit in that aspect, but you know, and I don't remember if we scored off. I think we did score off the possession, but you know, with the way that they play, we had to be ready offensively to make sure that we saw the different angles and handled their pressure the right way.
Yeah, and it ended up being okay as far as the day with turnovers. That ends up being a huge part of this game. You guys did score because you scored the first 6 points of that game, but 23 turnovers for Rogers. They came in averaging less than 11 per game. You guys were credited with 12 steals. So as you went back and looked at it, you know, points off turnovers, just ridiculous, 29-11. Talk about how much you felt you had to do with that, and the importance of turning takeaways into points.
Yeah, I think I thought, you know, going back to what we talked about previously, just the way we had been turning teams over, and we got away from that in those two previous home games with Quincy and Oklahoma Baptist. And I did feel like that's just our ability to get hands on basketballs, having active hands. You know, we talk a ton about, like, especially in our presses, if you're on the ball, like snake biting at the basketball and, you know, just trying to poke at it. And we got a few of those. We talked about being really good in our gaps, as far as like when you're in your gap and you get driven at, like, rake at the basketball, try to steal that thing. And, you know, we caused some turnovers with just our pressure too, and then making some tough passes and getting into passing lanes. And you know, the importance of it is, I mean, you get extra possessions. You got to make sure that you understand, you know, when you're transitioning down, understand who they got for defensive balance, and if there's an advantage there, and if not, pull that thing out and let's work the basketball and make them guard a little bit.
Yeah, and it worked, because there were, I know, 4 or 5 times that I referenced in the broadcast, takeaways turning into points, defense turning into offense. Rogers State had a really good day shooting the ball. Everybody in this league is capable. They came in 26% from 3. On this day, they hit 10 of 18. You would eventually even that up, making 10 of your own. So what was the scout on Rogers' half-court offense as far as, you know, looking for them as a shooting team?
Well, I mean, we knew they did have some shooters with Amaria. Other than that, everybody else we just kind of considered as capable. We knew Tim Jordan was capable of shooting it. Caden Fry, I even said it before the game. We talked about when Caden Fry's got the ball to, give him a little bit of room, because he does, with all their motion stuff, he does like to, when he goes into those DHOs, keep it and turn the corner and make sure we're staying in front of him. And there's a couple times where we're picking pops, and he hits 2 threes. Of course, he hits 2 threes against us, and hadn't made one all year. And we knew we had the ability to do it, but it's not something that are going to live and die with Fry shooting 3-point shots. And the couple of shots, Mason is a decent 3-point shooter, and he banks one in, end of the shot clock, or kind of throws one up at the end of the shot clock. So, and had a couple guys, Zero,
McKnight, new guard for them.
He, JUCO, I think he shot 36% from the 3-point line. So we knew he was capable. But he hadn't shot it very well to start the year, So, I mean, they're college basketball players, guys that don't have good percentages, they're capable. I mean, you look at some of our guys. I mean, Mason doesn't shoot great percentages from the 3-point line, but, I mean, to me, he's a shooter. Landon wasn't shooting great percentages, and obviously that's what he does. But you got to be able to adjust, and, I thought the last 10 minutes we adjusted to kind of take that stuff away.
Well, Landon Short, obviously, the player of the week for you guys with a 25-point game to follow a career-high 22, 6 triples in this game after he hit 5 against Central Oak. And it was great to talk to him afterwards, because, don't always get that opportunity. And he talked about the 3-point line it being, I think the phrase he used was a ride or die with it kind of thing. But how much of a dead 3 do you consider him? And talk about his overall offensive skill set a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's obviously the one thing that stands out with him is just his ability to shoot. When we went to recruit him, the first time we saw him was in Memphis, and I actually didn't see him first. Jamal saw him, and he just told me about him. And so, the next time I was out recruiting, we were in Indianapolis, and he didn't actually have a great game. The thing I saw was just how hard he played defensively, and just how hard in general he played. And then you could see the fluidity of his shot. Yeah, he didn't make a ton. I think he made maybe 1 3 in the game that I watched the first time, but you could see that it was there. And Coach Dupree had previously seen him go off a few times, and so we knew he could really shoot it. And right after I saw him the first game, I think we offered him right after that. And but he does. I think he was struggling a little bit, maybe confidence-wise, but he's not the type of kid to get down in the dumps and worry about it. And we kept on in practice. He kept missing, and he was like, "Dude, you got to keep shooting it. Keep shooting it. Don't second guess yourself." And I don't think there's any second guessing with some of the shots he takes sometimes.
He's going to keep shooting it now. I would too, right? Yeah. So he did have 4 steals in this game, and you talk about him defensively having to adjust, because he'd get handsy on the perimeter and he'd give away those fouls unnecessarily. And I asked him about that, defensively. He said, "Hey, I'm a dog," and he buys in. Just a total effort kid out of Austin, Texas, for the Gorillas. But you had tremendous balance in this game with 4 guys in double figures. And talked about Elijah Curry, 15 points. He had 6 of 8 shots. He had a couple of offensive rebounds as well. You've talked about he and Coates, and Don had a pretty good game on the glass this one as well, with 5 rebounds, 2 offensive rebounds. So with where you are as a rebounding team, I guess at the risk of overstating the obvious, talk about those 2 guys and their importance in that department for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously just with their athletic ability, their jumping ability, you want more. But the other thing too, like team-wise, like our guards got to help those guys out, because a lot of times, in the situation the shot goes up, you're underneath the basket, and your main concern is keeping your man off the glass. And sometimes that's hard to, check somebody out and then go get it. So just making sure, the Central Oak game in the first half, we talked a ton about our guards getting in and helping those guys rebound. I think Elijah, you'd like to see him get more rebounds per se than what he's averaging. But, the last 2 games, effort-wise, you can't question that at all. So I think it's just with the rebounds, it's just got to be a collective effort. And, that's the one part in basketball where I feel like you can be selfish, is going and getting rebounds.
Yeah, effort you can always control, and a lot of it is that with a little technique. Rogers State game, you guys are up at half, and then here they come. And, this was the first I don't know, 8 or 9 minutes of the second half. This was a great basketball game. It just like watching fighters trade punches, and then you guys take off. You had a 13-2 run. They call a timeout. It turns 17-2, and just gradually pulled away. At the end of the day, you outscored them 34-7. Final 10.5 minutes. Kind of a silly question, but that's about as good as you can play, right, in a conference game. That kind of complimentary ball.
Yeah, it was. I just those the barrage of threes that they made in scoring the basketball when they took the I think it was a 3-point lead. Again, just our guys' toughness mentally to not get broken and continue to fight. We made some adjustments especially with Amoria, just not letting him catch the basketball, make his catches tough, and make sure we shadow everything out. Don't switch anything when he's flying off of their motion stuff. Make sure we keep our matchups, and then have great communication in the ball screens. I thought we just did a tremendous job of that. We turned up the pressure, forced them obviously to turn the basketball over, and then just offensively, again, landing, making shots, and Elijah getting downhill, getting to the free throw line was another big aspect of it, and making sure that we got a quality shot every time down the floor. But the whole thing was just the defensive side of the floor was phenomenal for us.
With that said, with the offense, I asked Coach David this. I'll ask you too at this stage of the season. Where do you feel you are with your offensive install?
Well, I feel good. There's always, what's the biggest thing to me with offensive install is, like, it doesn't matter the plays you run. Like, you've got to run them with pace. You've got to know and understand where the shots are coming from. You've got to set good screens. But the biggest thing to me is, like, how do you play after the play? Because majority of the time teams are they're gonna know the sets, and you got the assistant coaches staring at the head coach.
Yeah.
Whatever I call out, and they're calling out what we're doing. So the biggest thing is how we play after the play, and making sure, like we talked about, the spacing aspect of it, understanding quick pitches when you get 2 on the basketball, getting rid of it, and then also how much do we get in the paint, whether it's from a post up or driving the basketball, because anytime you get the ball in the paint, your percentages definitely go higher as much as you can break the defense down. And we knew that going in, especially with Rogers State, like they're going to be super aggressive.
Yeah.
And try to get them in rotations as much as you can. And once you get that advantage, now you got to keep the advantage. And that was a big asterisk for us is making sure that we kept that advantage and got a good quality shot.
Well, that's where you go back to spacing, right? They have further to help and rotate it. It does become an advantage. You guys dealing with finals this week, and so a little different schedule. You also won't play for a week and a half. You guys had the early start with the event in St. Joe, November 1st and 2nd. So this many games into it. Talk about finals week and a little bit of a break with a trip to San Antonio in there.
Yeah, so it's kind of nice. Going into finals week being 2-0 and coming off of 2 quality wins makes everybody feel a lot better, and so we'll take Wednesday off. We'll go light today. We'll have medium intensity practice probably tomorrow, and Thursday and Friday kind of increase, and then once we get down to San Antonio, we'll do some stuff. But letting guys kind of get refreshed, rejuvenated, and making sure we go down there with the right mindset. Like we're not ready for Christmas break. We got 2 quality Division II games that we got to go and play, and traditionally, Midwestern State's always been really good, and Permian Basin is a team that's been on the rise in the past. And last year we started the same way, 2-0, and then we went down to San Antonio and laid 2 eggs. I mean, absolutely played terrible, and so we can't allow that to happen this year.
Yeah, Gorilla Men will co-host the River City Classic on the 16th and 17th with Central Oklahoma. Games at 2 facilities. Going to be a lot of good basketball down there, and San Antonio is a nice place to visit at that time of the year. So we'll look forward to that. We'll be down there with the men for those games, but that'll be the next broadcast on the men's side of things. And with that, we are done for this week. Again, our final shows of the calendar year. Appreciate the time from the coaches, and we'll look forward to the games coming up here before the Christmas break. For Amanda Davied and Jeff Boschee, I'm Eddie Lomshek. Thanks for being with us, and go Gorillas.